Sunday, and I go to church as usual at the JCC church in Kisumu, and the service is very fiery. The sermon on the day is about destiny, and Pastor Mark preaches about destiny, and every now and then he would tell us to talk to our neighbors and tell us to pass a word to your neighbor. And I would just look at my neighbor who was sitting next to me, and I would just tell him the way the preacher has said. So I wouldn't repeat the same words the pastor has said. I'll just tell him the way the pastor has said. In Kiswahili it will go venye pastor amesema. And so it was like that until the sermon ended. So when the sermon ended, the pastor asked us to stand up, and he told us to lift up our hands and started to pray over our destiny. And he told us to ask God and tell God something about our destiny. At that point, my eyes lifted up my hands, and I just told God, God, you know my destiny. At that point, I didn't know what to do. I was just there, a young person, just cleared high school. I don't know what I need to do. And even if I knew I didn't have the resources, I didn't have someone to come and guide me through and even fund what I was wanting to do. And so I just sat there. At the end of the prayers, the pastor told us to sit down. And as we were going to sit down, my neighbor turned to me and told me, thank you very much. It was a pleasure sitting next to you. Here is my card. Please call me. I took the card and just kept it in the pocket. I didn't bother looking at who is this person, because apparently this was a complete stranger that I hadn't seen before in our church. And so after the service, I walked out of the church, and let me say this. I walked out of the church at the time when the pastor told us to get into our pockets and give an offering to God. Usually I would walk out of the church at that giving point simply because I had nothing to give. And so I didn't want to feel that guilty. So I would always walk out of the church when it's giving time. To some people, they might have thought that I'm running away from giving, but deep down in my heart is I didn't have anything to give. So I would rather just walk out. So I walked out of the church. And when I got out of the church, I reached into my pockets and pulled up that card. And when I read the card, I was like, what? Reverend Daniel from Nairobi. I'm thinking, okay, so why did this reverend give me his card to call him? And that thing disturbed me for a while. I didn't call and I didn't do an email, but I remember sharing with a few friends, and everyone I shared to about that story of this pastor giving me, this reverend sitting next to me in the church and giving me his card, everyone told me, please send him an email or just call. And so one day, I met this lady. She's called Elizabeth. Elizabeth is an amazing lady. Elizabeth Wasike. I mean, I respect you. So Elizabeth calls me and tells me, please come to my office. I'll give you my computer so that you type an email to this reverend. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting. So I go to Elizabeth's office, and she gives me her computer, and I write an email to this reverend. I didn't know whether he was going to reply or anything, but he replied. And as he replied, we started talking. And in the process of talking, I started reflecting on the sermon on that day. And then in the process, we started opening up to each other. And I started telling him my story. And he also shared with me his story, that he's a reverend and all that. He's got a family with 2 sons and 1 daughter. And he'd like me to go to Nairobi and visit his family. I was like, this is a tall order. I'm like, okay, whatever. So one day, I got a chance to go to Nairobi. And when I got a chance to go to Nairobi on something that was completely different, related to Scripture Union, I told the Reverend that, I'm going to be in Nairobi. And he was like, please, once you're done with the business that's bringing you to Nairobi, I will come and pick you from the venue and I'll take you home. So don't plan to go back to Kisumu immediately. I was like, well and good, yes. And so I went after the scripture union meetings. I called the Reverend. He came, picked me up. I went to his home. He used to live in Kikuyu. Went to his home in Kikuyu. It was a very nice home. And coming from the ghetto, I had never been to such a place. So it was quite interesting. We had a lot of fun, meeting with his children, meeting with his wife, and he introduced me to them and said, "Oh, this is your other brother." I was like, wow. In my life, I've never called anyone a father. I've never called anyone dad. Not even preachers. I don't call men of God dads. And that's it. And so this guy is now introducing me to his children and his family like my son. And they all started calling me our brother. And I was like, oh dear, this is quite deep. And I remember this happened to be the very first guy I ever called dad. So in the process, we became more like family, and as a result of that, I went back to Kisumu. Then later on, I didn't stay longer. After about 2 months, I came back now to Nairobi officially, now to visit him, now not having any other business. And so when I came now, during this second time now, he encouraged me and told me, why don't you just try and look for something, some college or anything that you can go to. And I remember he took me, and because he was a priest in church, so one time he told me, by the way, there's this advert that was in our notice board on scholarship for some college. Can you come? Let's apply and see if you can get. And so I applied, and apparently it was interesting because I applied, and in 2 days I'm receiving a phone call, my friend, that okay, we've given you a scholarship, now you need to pay this amount and come. So I'm like, oh dear, now that's where the problem is, paying some other amount for me to be able to join that. And so, to cut the long story short, is I went to that college. Apparently, the amount of scholarship they had given me would basically take like for a whole semester. And so, but the challenge was, where I used to live with Reverend in Kikuyu, and where I was going to the college, it was to be very far, and with me not being familiar with the streets of Nairobi and all that, I would get to class late. I remember for 4 instances I would go and find that the class actually ended like 1 hour ago, and so my whole day would be wasted. I sat down and I thought to myself, saying, no, this is not the best idea. So I went to the Reverend. I told him, I'm thinking of moving and changing college, and at the same time I need to look for a place to live within Nairobi and not Kikuyu. And he was like, okay. And so quickly I went back to my foster brother. I talked to one of my foster brothers, Jack, and Jack was like, please come and live with us. And when you come to live with us, you can actually go to KCA, and that's how I went to KCA, that's along Thika Road. To cut the long story short, when I got admission in KCA and I started going to KCA, I figured out there's someone else that I need to look for here in Nairobi. And this is someone who we had worked with briefly. The person used to work in Kisumu and with World Vision. And at some point I used to volunteer with World Vision. So I remembered, oh, let me look for this lady called Jackie. So I called Jackie and I told Jackie, by the way, I'm in Nairobi. And Jackie was like, okay, we need to meet. I'm like, yeah. So we go and meet in town. And as we met in town, I shared with Jackie my story. I shared with her how I found myself in Nairobi. And Jackie was like, wow, so how do you want me to help you? And I told Jackie point blank, I need help in terms of school fees. I only have fee for this semester. After this semester is done, I don't know what next. And Jackie looked at me and said, Peter, I'm going to pay for you your college fee, and I'll be giving you money for upkeep, that is your transport and your lunch, because already I had somewhere to stay. And it was quite interesting, because from there, Jackie took the responsibility of being like a mother to me. She would pay my school fees. She would give me transport money for the whole week, and together with lunch for every single day. And I'm like, wow, So what am I trying to say in short? What I'm trying to say is sometimes God brings people in our way, along our way, to direct us towards our destiny. Right? If I never met this reverend in church on that day and he took a step and told me, "Here, call me," I wouldn't be where I am today. But because I obeyed that voice, I sent an email to him, we started communicating, we became friends, and even became families. And as a result of that, through that connection, the Lord was able to open up doors for me, and I was able to meet the likes of Tina and Jackie, who've been like great, as in, who imparted my life fully, right? So, remember, God brings people sometimes along our way to direct us and guide us towards our destiny. Thank you.